Brandon Groce. And we are the Game Changers. Designers, creatives alike. We are in a world that runs on value. Our next designs will be the shiniest. Our next animation will be the most buttery. Ladies and gentlemen, Game Changers, let the games begin.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another EditorX Live with me, your host, Brandon Groce. I'm super excited to be talking with you all today about hover interactions, some really cool hover interactions that I've been playing with, as you guys have either seen if you've been in the Discord or just by peeping around or just taking a look at what the actual profile or the thumbnail of this video was. First off, I want to say hello to you guys in the live chat. I know we're both live on the Facebook page and on YouTube. I want to welcome Renee and Night Owl. How you guys doing? And so many others who are probably either watching from work or just hanging out silently. So really quick, I do have a couple of house cleaning items. First things first, I do want to let you guys know that today we are going to be doing this live stream, but also afterwards, if you have additional questions that aren't answered during this 30-minute segment, please come join us in our Discord, because we are having a multi-hour session in which we help you guys with what we've talked about today. We get to meet you guys as new community members, as well as answer any sort of questions that you may have regarding EditorX, design, career, what have you, and it's just a good time to hang out with one another and talk design in EditorX and career. So with that said, let's talk about why we're doing what we're doing today, and most importantly, talking about the EditorX Hover Interactions Challenge. So let's dive in. And also I want to say hello to DJ Resolution. What's happening? All right, let's go ahead and move over to my screen. You guys can find the link to this down in the description. So as you guys know, the EditorX, or may not know, which is why I'm displaying this, the EditorX first challenge is really ending by September. I'm trying to look for the date here, September 20th. And the rules really to compete is enter your EditorX site or section that shows an inspiring way that you've used hover interactions. You can enter a creation you've built already specifically for the competition, or one you've made in the past. Plus, you can submit as many as you'd like. Submissions are due, as I said, by September 20th. The prizes are: winners will be announced at the end of the month and will receive 2 free 1-year EditorX Premium plans and the title of Creator of the Month, and be featured on EditorX's social media and community channels. Again, you guys can watch the kickoff video by moi if you guys want to entertain and submit your work in here. Just again, reiterating, this video just reiterates everything I've just mentioned here. And it also gives you links to the Facebook group, the forum, and the Discord. But we have all that stuff in the description. But this is why we're talking and really doing what we are doing today. So I'm excited if you all are also excited about diving into this challenge, because we really want to see what you guys build with this. All right, so let's move on to what it is that we're doing today, and also who it was inspired by, and then we'll break it down very simply. And I also, for those of you guys who are in the Discord, I will give you guys the link for all of the assets for this project, so you guys can play around with it as well. All right, first off, again, I see Kimberly in the chat. Welcome. Glad to see your digital face back from such a long hiatus. I know you have a lot of things going on at home, but it's always nice to have the family, the EditorX family, back together. So this is kind of what we're looking at. We have the Nike logo. Again, this is inspired by Wiktor Ares. You guys can check him out on Dribble. Amazing piece of work here. But essentially what we're going to be doing today is just the desktop portion. We have a nice little wave effect here and a glow. So we're going to talk about how that was made. And I did make this responsive, so we're not going to be doing all that today. But I just wanted to show you guys that this is what's it called. And if you guys, there was a little bit of a lag there, that's just because I'm streaming. That will not happen on anybody else's web service. I just have all these things going on at the same time, which there was a little bit of lag between the response time of the web browser. It's just my internet. So I'm looking forward to working with you guys on how I did this. It's really simple, but it looks cool. All right, let's go ahead and jump into how this works. So first off, I'm going to kind of break down how basic this is. It's really only maybe 3 to 4 pieces. So let's kind of break this down first, and then we will go through the hover interactions that I made to make this happen. All right, first off, let me go ahead. I'm just going to turn off things one at a time so you guys can see how this is made. So first off, there's only one section. We have a trigger container that essentially, and I'll go into more detail about this, because this is what's essentially gonna take us into the hover interaction side of things. But essentially, I've made a container that is invisible, that has 0 opacity, that when I hover over it, which is basically, I've made it and positioned it in a way where it is just around the Nike logo. So if we preview, right, if I hover in that invisible container box, it is going to trigger 3 effects that are on multiple elements. And if you guys have any questions, like, Brandon, you're speaking gibberish, what does any of that mean? Please let me know in the chat as well. Okay, and we'll go into how I built these. But essentially, like I said, this container is applying 3 effects that I've made on multiple different elements throughout the page here. So let's talk about what those elements are. So I'm gonna hide a couple of things. I'm gonna hide this container. So I'm just gonna right click, go to don't display. We have our blur image. So I'm actually going to, which is not displayed, it's at 100, basically 0% opacity right now. What I'm gonna do, and I'm just gonna name this blur for right now, or shine, either one. I'm gonna go to effects, and I'm gonna go to the initial state because I've set the initial state to 0. For right now, I'm gonna set this to 100 so you guys can see that there is something there. So we have this, perfect. I'm gonna set this to don't display because again, I'm going through everything, showing you kind of what is behind the scenes, and we'll slowly try to build this together. These 2 pieces, very simple. It was just 2 H2s with the font size, or the font tech, or the font Playfair display at 20 pixels. I'm gonna don't display these really quickly. Again, reverse engineering before we actually build this puppy back up. And now what is really interesting about this piece, so if I go ahead and click this is an image. If I were to duplicate this, or I'm gonna just turn everything off but this image here. So I'm gonna delete, or not delete, don't display everything else that is underneath it, because this is kind of like the magic. I kind of made a image that is a mask. And I'm gonna select my section here, and I'm gonna turn the background to, I'm gonna change it to a wacky, maybe a green here. So what you guys see here is this entire image, and I'm gonna go to my media. Maybe I'll open up Illustrator so you guys can see what exactly I did here. Renee says I like shine. Reading the live chat here really quickly, we have She Ria saying, is EditorX similar to Figma or Adobe XD? Never used it before. It's a great question, and I am going to move to full screen to answer that. So the question was, is EditorX similar to Adobe XD or the other design software counterparts? And the answer is, it can be, but really what it is a platform that helps you take your designs and your initial design software and helps them bring them to life, essentially. So Adobe XD, other design platforms, those are what we design our vision in. EditorX is something where it's like, it's real, right? So there you are able to design in Adobe XD and then take and bring your designs to life in EditorX. So it's real, it's an actual website. And so I hope that answers your question. However, does EditorX operate very similarly to Adobe XD and the other design softwares? 100%. So hopefully we give you a little bit of a taste like that. And, you know, hopefully people who are learning about EditorX understand that how easy it is to not just design really cool things in our design platforms of choice, Adobe XD and others included, but how easy it is to transition those things into real live websites, interactions without the need for a developer. So I hope that answers your question. And Kimberly had it right off the bat. Thank you so much for answering that. So back to Illustrator here. I'm going to open up this piece here. So essentially what I have here, if we take a look at this, is I have a black background, and on top of it I have my Nike paths here, and I've basically cut a hole for our Nike piece here. So if I pull this, whoops, let me pull it over as a group. If I pull this over anything, you guys can see that essentially there's a hole in that Nike piece. So that's kind of the magic that we did here. We uploaded this as a high quality PNG, and we essentially put a whole bunch of things behind it. That being, I'm gonna go ahead and don't display this now. And as you guys can see, this is our section background. And I'm going to reveal two things here. I'm going to reveal our little waves here, and we have two of them. So let me go to my layers. Let me open this container. We have a red, orange, and an orange-red gradient. So very quickly, I'm going to try to separate these. It's very hard to tell. Basically, this top one here, it goes from red to orange, and this bottom one here goes from orange to red. Kind of wanted to give it a little bit dynamic, a little bit of difference in contrast, but it's very faint. I'm going to Control Z that. And I've basically put them in a container. And so what I want to show you guys here is what happens with this target container and these waves and what happens with them. So I'm going to go ahead and preview. And remember, if you guys, this invisible container that I have, right? That is what is triggering the waves to go like this and basically pass each other. And I'll show you how I set these up. Okay, I'll show you the initial state and the after state. So if I were to create this again, I'm gonna go back to edit site. All I did was I pulled in two assets, right? I went to my media, my uploads, and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to just pull these two. 1, 2, add to page. And we have these here, just like this. And I'm going to pull them to a specific size. I'm not going to make them super big. I'm just going to Control D to duplicate. And I might actually just keep these two at, we'll just keep the same ones. We don't need to change the, maybe we'll change the vector art. So we have the red, and now I'm going to pick the orange to red here. Okay. Now I'm going to make sure that these are all the same height here. So I'm going to squeeze them just like this. And now I get this option, place in container, and I'm going to do exactly that, because one of the things that I do want to do and that I've done here is what you'll notice is that at this scale, the waves are super large. Like for example, if I click on this container here and I go to my inspector and layouter here, and I see a really good question in the live chat, so I'll get to that very quickly, Harsh. So I want to show you guys, I have a setting on this wave container and it's set to hide. Which basically helps contain the extra things that are in that container. It cuts off all the excess stuff that are outside of 100% width of this container. So to break that down, this container is only expanding 100% width of the viewport. Okay, or the size of the screen that the website is on. Now, if I set this to hide, or excuse me, to show, what you'll notice here is, let me see, I actually should have gotten it. Let's go ahead, hide, show. All right, and I will do another one here. I will also send the section to show. Huh. I guess I must have fixed it. But yeah, I did. Okay. But depending why I'm mentioning this, and I'll actually kind of try to do this here. This is kind of over explaining. But if you have a asset, for example, if I scale this really far and it's off the board here, there's a couple weird things that can happen. Your viewport could actually expand, and that is not what you want. I'm actually not going to dive into it because we don't have that problem here. I would have to create the problem to then explain it, but we don't have it here. Essentially, all you need to know is if you're trying to do something like this, make sure the assets that you're using to create this effect stay within your viewport. And if they don't, please come jump in the Discord and actually ask that question so we can show you how to overcome that. But I don't want to spend 15 minutes on creating the problem to show you guys how to solve it. Okay, so back to this. We've made a container for this, and now to create the hover interactions that we're looking for is pretty easy. So I'm gonna make another container here, and I'm actually gonna keep it visible. So we have our container. This will be our trigger spot. I'm gonna move this down just a little bit, and I am going to start creating hover interactions or triggers on this rectangle for these elements to move. All right, so first thing, I'm going to open up my inspector, go to my beta interactions here, and I am going to go to the triggers tab and add a trigger. And before I move on, I do want to move to this question in the live chat. So Harshika is asking, does it help to work on micro interactions and interactions? I'm wondering if you're curious about, does EditorX help with micro interactions and interactions in general? First off, if that is your question, the answer is yes. The ease in which you can create micro interactions in EditorX with just clicks and not messing with timelines is very beneficial to beginners, people who are jumping into web design or just design in general for the first time, versus having to learn very highly technical things in After Effects, or even honestly, because I am such a proponent of Adobe XD, this is very similar in terms of how easy it is to create animations as a beginner, somebody trying to look for a very complicated and beautiful looking animation with a lot less work than some of the other platforms around. So I hope that answers your question. All right, so back to this. Let's go ahead. We're going to add our trigger here. We're going to click hover, and now we get a couple options. We have the affected element, which is basically telling EditorX, okay, you set up a trigger. When this trigger happens, what element do you want to have be affected? And so the default is container self, or really self. So this is saying, hey, when this is hovered, do you want something to happen to the same element that you're trying to build the trigger on? That's not what we're trying to do. We are trying to choose a element on our canvas. So we're going to go ahead and click that option from the drop down, and we are going to select one of our vector art pieces, the left one in particular. So we select that, we're going to go hit done. And now we have action types. We can apply an effect or remove an effect. We're going to apply an effect. And the effect here, we're going to go ahead and we have, like I said, you know, Harshika, there's tons of pre-selected effects that we can apply. So for example, I can select any one of these. For example, I can select grow, and I have parameters that I can mess around with here. I can click done and immediately go to preview, and I can hover over this container, and we already see an effect here. Not that much work, right? But we're going to do something custom. So we'll go back to edit, go back to our container, go back to our hover effect that we applied, and we are going to change the effect from the preset to the custom. And we're just going to call this red move 2. So I'm going to start designing this, and this is kind of where we get a whole bunch of custom things. I can now manually move this wherever. I can scale it however. I can literally animate exactly what I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do here is, if we look at this adjustments panel over here, so we have two things. We have a timing panel, which basically as we move things, it will ask us what is the timing and the easing in which we want to make that move or change happen. So for example, I want this vector art to go from here to the other side, just like this. And so basically I want it to translate about 371 pixels. It does the math for me automatically. I don't have to do that. If I wanted to scale it, I could send this to 150 pixels by 150 pixels, so it scales. And we can rotate it, we could mess with the opacity, all kinds of things. And as you guys see, once I've made a move, I'm gonna set this back to 100%. We get this timing here. So it asks us when we want this animation to start, when we want it to end. We want it to be a little bit on the slower end. So we want 2 seconds. So we'll start at 0, and the whole animation will take 2 seconds to go from over here to over here. Now, one thing that a lot of people might ask is, Brandon, how do you know that you're designing the actual hover interaction? Take a look at this drop down here. We have, right now, is showing that we are designing the effect of red move to, but we also have the initial state here, which is basically where the element starts and where it stops. So if you want to actually change where the initial state is, you can do that here in the drop down, or go back to the hover effect end state. So I'm going to go ahead and hit done, and I'm going to do the exact same thing to the right side. So I'm going to select my trigger container, add new interaction. Remember, container, not self. We want to choose on the canvas the thing that we want to animate. We're going to hit done after we select our right hand wave, or right hand side wave. We're going to apply an effect in a custom one. We're going to call this orange move to. And we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to move this to the opposite side over here. Again, we're working on the orange move to. I don't want, since I manually moved this, there was a little bit of a negative Y axis that happened. I'm just going to zero that out. And I'm going to change the end of this animation also to 2 seconds. And we're going to go ahead. I can also play this to see how it works. That looks good enough for me. And we're going to hit done. So now when I go to preview and I take a look at what's going on here, I now am going over top of this container here, and we have that nice little wave that we have down here. Now the next piece is, well, Brandon, when you did this, you had something a little bit different. They came up, right? So they lifted each other. So how exactly does this work? It's pretty much the same thing. Now we're going to add one more interaction. So we have them crossing, but now we need to raise them up. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to edit site, click our trigger container, and we are going to go to add a new interaction. This time, again, choose a element on the container or on the canvas, and I want to open up my layers because now I want to target our actual container that is hosting our orange and red vectors here. And I'm making sure I'm selecting the correct container here. So selecting this, and I now want to go ahead and click done. We have the right element selected. We're going to apply effect, and that effect is just going to be we're going to call this move up. So now all we're going to do is we're going to take this container and we are going to move this in a vertical array, just like this. Now I do want to make sure that there was no X translation here. We just want it to go up 184 pixels. And of course it's negative here. And I'm going to also set this to an end at 2 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and play so I can see what that looks like. And again, the elements are not going sideways because we are initially working on just the move up animation. So I like that. We're going to hit done. So now what is going to happen now that all these three things are together? We have, as soon as we hover on this, 3 hover effects will apply. We have our red and orange elements that are going to cross each other. And we also have the container that both of those elements are in. It's going to move up. So this is what we're going to have. Easy day. Just like this. Now I can move this container pretty much anywhere. This could be a button, right? I'm just showing you guys how invisible things can act as triggers for interactions anywhere on your site. And then we are going to add in basically the hole punched Nike logo on top and show you guys really finish the touch here exactly. Okay, so we are going to go to preview, boom, so hover over this, and we have that effect. So that's how this portion was broken down. Let everybody know in the chat if this is feeling good to you. Don't forget to like this video and also subscribe for more of this content. But because we're coming up 5 minutes left in this segment before we jump into the Discord for our next line of meeting new people in our community and just hanging out and talking design, career, and EditRx. I'm going to fast track us very quickly. I'm going to go to my layers panel here. And I'm going to don't display our containers that we just made here for that demonstration. Okay, so really after I have built that hover interaction, everything else becomes really easy. All I needed to do was upload and import this Nike PNG, and essentially what all I had to do was, let me select the image and let me go to the layouter here. All I needed to do was set the width and the height to 100% so that it fits full and nicely to the entire screen. The next thing I did was I added both my titles, EditRx and Brandon Groce, and inspired by Wiktor Ares. And then I added my blur, and I'm actually going to change. I'm going to add in, there was two. Let me actually don't display this, by the way, because I added two more images, okay? I added a paper texture, and I added an orange square that you guys necessarily cannot see at the moment because the interaction, here we go. So there's also this invisible orange or reddish square behind things to help fill in the back of that Nike swoosh. So basically what happens if I preview this, let me turn on this container, or the correct container. Let me don't display these again. Again, showing you guys a little bit behind the scenes. So when I preview this without the actual Nike top, so all this is going on behind the background, okay? So we have our two waves going together. We have our blur turning on, our Nike swoosh blur, so that's like the highlight, and we have that red basically getting filling up the rest of the gaps in the Nike swoosh. So all this is going on behind and being triggered by this invisible container here. And all I have done to complete this is just turn on our image here. We have our shine. Again, I'm going to return this to its initial state, which is, I'm going to go to the initial state, I'm going to edit that, and I'm going to set the opacity to 0. Now this is the only last thing that our container actually, our trigger container, that is one of the pieces that is being triggered by the container. Basically all it is it's turning, by hovering over that invisible container, we are turning on and off that blur or that shine. So I'm going to preview everything. I'm going to hover over my space, and now it looks pretty clean. And all that is again, we're going to finalize all this was. I'm going to don't display the PNG. I'm going to preview 2 waves, 1 rectangle in the back, and 1 blur that comes on again after 2 seconds. So this is pretty easy, guys. All you have to do is this, about 3 to 4 hover interactions, which are very easy to make, with a nice textured white background or paper background. And all I've done here is I've put a image on top that has a hole punch that just allows people to see a very small amount of that. And once I hover, has a cool effect. So with that said, that is the end of today's reverse engineer of a pretty cool interaction that doesn't take that much time. Again, if you guys are in our Discord later today, I will share with you guys the assets for this so you guys can go ahead and give it a try. And with that said, if you have any questions, please don't forget you can have a unlimited amount of questions in our Discord. That's what it's for. If you haven't already joined, please do. Links down in the description. And ladies and gentlemen, that is it. So with that said, we come here on YouTube at 1 p.m. EST every Wednesday, and every 1:30 p.m. EST, we jump into our Discord to talk a little bit more in depth about EditRx, design, career, and things like that, and also to meet some of our newest EditRx community members. So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, liking this video and subscribing would be most appreciated so that you guys can get more EditRx delicious content to your front door. And also do not forget to hit the bell notification so you guys know when we go live each and every time, or get notified when we upload new EditorX tips and tricks. So with that said, I want to thank you guys, Shreya, Kimberly, RB, Renee, Shreya, DJ Resolution, and Night Owl. Thank you guys so much for hanging out, and I will see you guys in the Discord in just a moment. So with that said, have a great day, and I will talk to you guys very soon. Peace.